Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister for First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We have a special welcome to the members of the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Manitowoc, who are joining us today for our online service. We're so glad to have you with us. I am honored to introduce our pulpit guest, member Beth Monholland. Beth joined First Church in 2013 and has served in a variety of roles: coffee host, book sales, membership committee, Our Whole Lives facilitator, and Geography of Grace facilitator. Beth worked in higher education for almost 20 years and began attending Meadville Lombard Theological School this fall. She is filled with gratitude for our First Church community and for her partner of more than 20 years. Beth, it is good to have you in our virtual pulpit this morning. Finally, I welcome all of us to our worship service by inviting everyone to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action.
Good morning. Today's opening words are a poem by W.S. Merwin titled, "To the New Year." With what stillness at last you appear in the valley, your first sunlight reaching down to touch the tips of a few high leaves that do not stir, as though they had not noticed and did not know you at all. Then the voice of a dove calls from far away in itself to the hush of the morning. So this is the sound of you, here and now, whether or not anyone hears it. This is where we have come with our age, our knowledge such as it is, our hopes such as they are, invisible before us, untouched and still possible.
Hello, my name is Reverend Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and I'm honored to serve as the Minister of Religious Education at the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. The story I have for you today is called The Gift of Nothing by Patrick McDonnell. It was a special day, and Mooch wanted to give his best friend Earl a gift. But what to get him? He had a bowl, he had a bed, he had a chewy toy, Squeak. He had it all. Mooch thought and thought, what do you get someone who has everything? Nothing. He would give Earl the gift of nothing. But in this world filled with so many somethings, where could he find nothing? Mooch often heard Frank say there was nothing on TV. But as far as Mooch could tell, there was always something on TV. Mooch often heard Dozy and her friends say there was nothing to do. But as far as Mooch could tell, everybody was always doing something. Millie came home from the store and said, there's nothing to buy. So Mooch went shopping. Mooch looked up and down every aisle. He found many, many, many somethings. The latest this, the newest that. But as far as he could tell, nothing was not for sale. So Mooch went home and sat on his pillow and just stayed still, as cats often do. And not looking for it, he found nothing. So he went and got a box and put nothing in it. Then Mooch thought, maybe Earl deserves more than this. So he got a bigger box. Now that is plenty of nothing. For me, said Earl. Mooch, you didn't have to get me anything. Who told him? Thought Mooch. Earl opened Mooch's gift. There's nothing in here, said Earl. Yes, said Mooch, nothing but me and you. So Mooch and Earl just stayed still and enjoyed nothing and everything. The end.
Dear ones, because of the unprecedented times in which we are living and the ways our lives are being touched by the grief and loss of this global coronavirus pandemic, we are continuing our pandemic practice of lighting the COVID candle for any of our members who have had a loved one die during this period, either from COVID or another cause. If you have had a loved one die from coronavirus or another cause during this time and would like the COVID candle lit for them during Sunday worship, please contact one of the ministers. On December 14th, we passed a terrible and grim milestone of more than 300,000 deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. We also grieve the deaths of loved ones of our church members. Elizabeth Martorell's dear friend Patrick Coffey died of COVID-19 on Wednesday, December 9th, at age 88. Eileen Teska's dear friend Kleina Barrett died Sunday, December 13th, at age 78, after 25 days in the hospital with COVID-19. Kleina was a devoted member of Olympia Brown Unitarian Universalist Church in Racine. It is our pandemic practice to light our COVID candle to honor the lives and deaths of church members' loved ones during the COVID-19 pandemic. Today we light our candle in honor of the now over 317,000 people who have died from COVID-19 in the United States, and our own church members' loved ones, Patrick Coffey and Kleina Barrett.
Friends, as we now enter a time of spoken meditation, followed by silence and then spirit of life, I invite you to bring your attention fully into your body. Take a few deep breaths. and know that your breath connects you to all life. Feel your heartbeat and know it is the heartbeat of all life. Feel your heart center and know that that grounds you to all life. And now I invite you more fully into your body and into stillness with these words from the Reverend Angela Herrera. Beneath the hustle and bustle, beneath the stream of thoughts that clamors and chatters over the landscape of our interior world, beneath our habits of momentum and stirring, there is stillness, deep and peaceful, the place where creation begins. Who lives there? We know her by many names: truth, love, God, wisdom. We turn our hearts toward her face, toward the mystery, and bring our prayers of awe, of longing, of hope, of exhaustion. She holds us in our grief and anger, in our disappointment, our loneliness, and our rebirth. From her viewpoint, she sees us, children of stillness, children of love. She sees our place in the order of things, joined together in the larger story, and she invites us again and again into living, invites us into loving, invites us into being loved. May we be restored to wholeness and blessed with peace. May all those whom we encounter receive this blessing through our being in the world.
My name is Paul Geenan, and I will be your worship associate this morning. Our theme this month is stillness, and I want to start with my memories of an August morning in 2009. I had taken my coffee and gone outside to check our garden. It was early morning. The forecasted midnight rain had passed us by, and the parts of our garden that had not received attention from my 30-year-old cast aluminum tractor sprinkler were dry. Inside, our 11-year-old grandson was sleeping the deep morning sleep that active boys covet. His head was buried deep within his covers, and the loud chirping of the yellow finches did not penetrate his consciousness. The dry August air was an early indicator of the time when my grandson would return to Oshkosh to start fall football practice. You may recall that in 2009, that was a year of national crisis with failing banks and businesses, the economy in a free fall recession, and political divisions undergirded with racial bias. Family members and friends were struggling with employment and mental health issues. Reflected a national trend exemplified by lengthening lines at food pantries, homeless shelters at full capacity, and oversubscribed community health clinics for the uninsured. It was hard to feel optimistic about the future. Yet, in thinking back to the stillness of that August morning over 11 years ago, I remember the acute sense of awareness I had of nature's seasonal transitions, with the way reflection can reveal a comparable ebb and flow in our own lives. In the quiet, I was able to take notice of the garden's seasonal rhythms and find reassurance that hard times would pass, as they had before and would again. Almost 11 years later, our nation is in crisis again, at a level previously unimaginable. The worries of the past seem almost trivial by comparison, but they were not inconsequential. Some of our troubles were resolved, but others festered and continued to call out for justice. Our grandchildren, young adults now, have inherited a seemingly dystopic world of pandemic anxiety, economic injustice, and racial division. I do what I can to guide and encourage them as I try to model that justice works is never finished, but it is hard not to feel discouraged when victory seems small and rare. So once again, I look to nature to help me be still. I am sitting on a park bench on the water's edge at Lake Shore Park, a resting place on my morning bike ride. Facing the harbor's center gap, I admire the rippled and nickel sheen surface of the water. The familiarity of the scene is relaxing and reassuring. I have nothing to do here. I can just be still. I watch 8 American coots hug the shoreline, supporting each other. Their dark bodies, about the size of young chickens, are bobbing into light wave action. Their yellow beaks provide a sharp contrast to their dark brownish-black bodies. Coots, I've read, are resilient and extraordinarily well adapted for their environment. I think to myself, this old coot got through the Great Recession, and I will get through the pandemic. There is a vaccine now, and maybe by next summer or fall, I will be able to visit my kids and grandkids, dine with friends, worship with others at church, and chat with folks at coffee hour. In the meantime, although work for justice never ends, I must remember that stillness is a gift that offers peace and perspective to those who embrace it.
Earlier this fall, I went for my usual early morning walk before work. It was still dark out, as it often is when I go walking, and while the air was mild and the stars were still shining, after a few minutes, I stopped noticing that and got lost in my head. I was creating a mental to-do list for the day and the week, detailing for myself the papers I needed to write for grad school, the meetings I had scheduled with my students. I was planning for projects at work and even mapping out conversations I would have with colleagues. With all that activity whirling inside me, I failed to notice that outside of me, in the grass alongside the parkway I was walking on, a mere 2 or 3 feet away, a skunk was ambling along. Now, fortunately, I saw it out of the corner of my eye and jumped. The poor skunk jumped too. We both stood there, facing each other a couple of feet apart, the skunk utterly still with its tail in the air, and me utterly still with my heart racing, daring not to move. Now, in those few seconds of stillness, as we eyed each other and my heart settled down, I took a deep breath and then slowly backed away. As I got further away, the skunk turned and ran back into a stand of trees. I watched it go, laughing at myself, apologizing to the skunk for disturbing its morning, and thanking the universe for the near miss that reminded me how important it is to be present here and now. Now, a particular irony for me with this story that I was aware of immediately is that one of the classes I was taking this fall at seminary was an introduction to Buddhist traditions, and I was, in fact, that very week reading a book about how important mindfulness practices are. And so, on that mental to-do list I was creating, I had actually put, be more mindful. So, that's part of why I laughed as well. I had to thank the universe that forever after, when I have moments of my mind racing ahead into the future, that I would have that moment of remembering the skunk and taking a pause. But that moment got me to thinking of other times when I am clearly not in the moment, and of how challenging it is for us humans, or at least us Western American humans, to be fully present. It's as if, I thought, we have a remote control for our lives, that we are constantly pressing fast forward, like I was that morning, speeding ahead to some end goal we can't see or maybe even get to. And many of us have our fingers on the rewind button, looking back to some glory days. So much of the political discord these past few years seems to be from people who want to cling to some mythical version of the past, wanting always to be going backwards, stuck on how things used to be, unable to accept how they are. Whenever I hear people talk about the good old days, I think of my grandparents, of how my papa had to start working in the coal mines in 1934 when he was 11 years old because his family needed the income so badly. He never learned to read or write, and he worked 10-hour shifts 5 and 6 days a week for over 30 years. And at the same time, Poor white people like my grandfather's family were laboring under corrupt, exploitative systems, while Black people in this country were being lynched daily. Ironically, I think too many people today who are pressing rewind to get us back to some mythical days of yore ignore the harsh realities of those days altogether. We sometimes press rewind, though, not out of nostalgia, but because of grief and loss, missing loved ones who have passed on. When my grandmother died 7 years ago, as much as I held on to the many joyful memories of her, my rewind button often took me back to conversations we never had, to the things I didn't do, rewinding to regret over and over instead of to love. Part of why I tell so many stories of her is a way for me to interrupt that tendency to pause and be present with my grief and feel now how much she is still with me. Of course, being present with grief or whatever feelings we happen to have is not always easy. Being mindfully present in each moment takes, as the Buddhists say, practice. Because just as easy as it is to press fast forward or rewind on our life's remote control, it's even easier sometimes to press play and move through our days on autopilot. I remember once, years ago, I had about a 20 or 25-minute commute to work. There were a couple of routes I would take depending on the traffic, either getting on the interstate or taking the city streets, which is the route I preferred because I could meander through several county parks on my way home. One evening, I pulled into my driveway, turned off my car, and sat there, stunned by the realization that I had no idea what route I had taken home. It's not that I had an out-of-body experience or anything. I remembered getting in the parking lot, turning my radio on, and then all I remembered was listening to music and singing along to the songs and paying attention to inside my car, but nothing outside of it. I sat there in the car, in my driveway, a little terrified that I had just essentially pressed play on my life and tuned out the world. Now, being able to do that is a great skill if you're in a really busy household trying to read a good book. It is not so great a skill when you're driving a car in a busy city. But we all do it, even if metaphorically. We go through our days not noticing so much of what is around us, not seeing the beauty of bare winter trees or the shapes that form in the clouds, or poignantly, the very real needs of our own bodies or the people we encounter. Mindlessly pressing play is a way of numbing ourselves or of distancing ourselves from the moments we're in. I think about how many of us have had a streaming service on for so long that Netflix, let's say, asks us if we're still watching. How many of us play the TV or radio just for constant background noise? Most of us, probably, at some point. I know for me, pressing pause, literally, and feeling the silence that follows such constant noise is always a relief. It's a relief when we do it metaphorically as well. But for all too many of us, pressing play and moving through our days on autopilot seems to be our only option. People have to work long hours at multiple jobs just to make ends meet, or they're scrambling to find work and a sense of security, especially now in the time of the pandemic. There are so many reasons that pressing pause seems out of reach. The exploitative systems of disaster capitalism and white supremacy that demanded labor from my 11-year-old grandfather are still at work today, declaring some bodies have worth and others are disposable. In such systems, pressing pause seems like a luxury we cannot afford. But in these systems, pausing is even more of a necessity. The NAP ministry, which our own Monica Kling Garcia mentioned in a sermon this past summer, advocates for rest as a form of resistance. And our UU principle of the inherent worth and dignity of each person is a radical belief in the face of oppressive systems. We deserve to press pause, to rest and renew our bodies and spirits, because we are more than cogs in some industrial machine. We are inherently worthy as people, no matter what we produce. It's so sad to me that with all the grief and pain this pandemic has wrought, there has been a thread of pressure to be productive, to write a novel or master some skill or begin new projects. I saw a meme this past summer that said something like, if you haven't accomplished your dreams, it's not that you didn't have time, you didn't have motivation. And I thought, how disturbing is that sentiment? Why is it not okay to just be, to just sit with the crushing sense of uncertainty and pain? Why the constant pressure to produce? I told you earlier that my grandfather worked as a miner for over 30 years. What I didn't tell you is that by the time I knew him, black lung disease had forced him to retire. And so my memories of my grandfather are not of his days as a miner, but rather my memories of him are filled with days of watching him tinker and rebuild small engines and whittling bits of wood, of hearing him play his harmonica or whistle on the porch. He also spent what seemed like to me hours just sitting and watching the woods, silently tracking birds and squirrels, and pointing out what he saw to whichever grandkid would stop long enough to sit with him. He learned to pause in his later years. And while I didn't understand what that meant when I was a kid, I think of it often now, and of how he and all of us deserve moments like that throughout our lives. Moments like what Paul described in his worship associate story, where he felt the grace of his garden despite the weight of concerns he also carried. We all deserve to sit and watch the woods, to pause and tend our metaphorical gardens, and to reconnect with what makes us human. Buddhist teacher Tara Brach, who Reverend Jennifer referenced in her sermon just a couple of weeks ago, says that pausing is a sacred art and that through it, we develop the capacity to stop hiding, to stop running away from our own experience. We begin to trust in our natural intelligence, in our naturally wise heart, in our capacity to open to what arises. How beautiful to think that our inherent worth and dignity as people includes a naturally wise heart. And while it may be difficult to pause and to listen to that naturally wise heart, when we do, it means we can stop mindlessly rewinding or fast forwarding, stop mindlessly pressing play, and in the pause, enter our life with intention. There is nothing inherently wrong with our rewind and fast forward buttons. In fact, I love my rewind button. I love remembering the people who I've loved and who have gone on, of remembering my first date with my husband, or the births of my nephews, or really amazing moments with my friends. The rewind button connects me with my heritage, with people and events that have shaped me. Reflecting on our past is how we make meaning of our lives. And so when we can press rewind with intention, it connects us to who we are. And it connects us to who we want to be. Because in looking forward with purpose, we can also be looking ahead with hope. Pressing the fast forward with intention means we can make plans and set goals and see the possibilities for ourselves and the world that we want to help create. We enter into beloved community by pressing fast forward with intention. Seeing the world we want to make also, though, means we have to see the one we live in here and now realistically. And so pressing play with intention means being fully present, even and especially when we're uncomfortable. Engaging with intention is what makes the difference here, and it is in our sacred pauses that intentionality is born. Pausing regularly to build that capacity that Tara Brach talks about can mean committing to a spiritual practice of meditation or prayer. It can mean committing to a practice of embodiment through walking or yoga or dance or whatever form embodiment might take for you. It can mean deliberately connecting with others. And the more we practice pausing, practice disrupting our autopilot, the more space we have to engage with intention. Another Buddhist teacher I encountered this fall, Lama Rod Owens, who wrote an amazing book called Love and Rage, which I highly recommend, says in that book that pausing in this way with intentionality is how it opens up spaciousness within us to see and accept all the parts of us, the parts we are ashamed of and want to deny, the parts we are angry with, the parts we love, the parts we inherited from family and culture. It is not easy and it is not comfortable to sit with all of who we are, Lama Rod says, but it is necessary to live fully and with wholeness. Lama Rod says, there's no liberation without actually leaning forward and looking at things that we habitually run away from in order to see things as they really are, not as we have imagined them. Pressing play with intention is what leads to our liberation, because with intention, we're able to see what is and imagine what can be. Ironically, I think it is in pausing when we learn to see ourselves in the present world more clearly. It is in pausing when we can engage with past and future with intention to make meaning of who we are. It is in pausing that our bodies and spirits can be renewed to continue whatever work we are called to do. Pausing the work helps us do the work. 2020 has certainly been a year for taking pause, with the pandemic forcing us out of our usual routines, and with the massive uprisings of the Black Lives Matter movement demanding we stop looking away from present realities. And while I doubt our future selves will look back fondly on 2020, we can look back and see how this year dug deep grooves of pain into us that helped us become more of who we are. Rewinding our memories to the moments and the people we've lost is a human act of honoring those losses. Looking ahead with hope into 2021 is an act of resistance and resilience. There is so much work calling for our attention, and it will be too easy to rush into that work, to rush through our days. But what I hope for each of us in the new year is that we remember to pause, that we remember what a gift pausing and nothingness can be, like the empty box in the story Kimberly shared with us. The empty box can be filled with stillness, with silence, with permission to just be. That empty box is the spaciousness we each carry inside ourselves and that we can access when we pause long enough to feel it. We can just rush through our days, ignoring the trees and the gardens and the skunks that might come across our path. We can rush through our days, ignoring the pain and suffering inside and outside of us. We can mindlessly work, pressuring ourselves to produce more and more. We can cling to a past long gone. Or we can pause and accept what has been, what is, and welcome what may be wholeheartedly. That's one of the gifts pausing has given me this year. The realization that the path I am walking is not one to my best self, which is something I've said over and over in the past few years. I want to be my best self. I think I even said it in a sermon a few years ago. But pausing this year in the emptiness and the spaciousness has opened up inside me. I've come to realize what I want is not best self. I want a whole self. Wholeness can be found in pressing pause. In wholeness is what I want for each and every one of us in this new year. May it be so. Amen.
Be still. Breathe in awareness. Let go. Let go. Judgment and attachment. Accept what is. Gently with compassion. You are where you should be. Be You are where you should be. Be still.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your generosity. Pledges are at the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity, and we are also grateful for additional gifts and thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to UU $, or giving on our website. Your gifts help us continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. In December, Planned Parenthood Wisconsin is our Share the Plate recipient. Planned Parenthood Wisconsin reflects the diverse needs of our communities. It currently provides affordable, quality, and confidential health care to 61,000 people each year in its 24 health centers across Wisconsin. To give, please go to their website. You can see all these options on your screen now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving, right now or when you come back later. Your support truly keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you.
Friends, in the words of the singer-songwriter Vienna Tang, it's the season of bowing our heads in the wind, of feeling the full weight of our burdens. It's the season of knowing you are not alone here, not alone in the dark. So don't forget I love you. As we move into this new year, we will be carrying the full weight of 2020 and all that came before it. But we are also carried by love. And in that love, there is a spaciousness and a wholeness when we pause to accept it. May it be so, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.